Hello, everyone. Oh, my goodness. Welcome to OG Blizzard Magic, the Inside Scoop. I promise you, scoops, and we're going to get them. My name's Jesse Cox. I am a YouTuber, a streamer, a Twitcher, a video game producer. If you've ever played the game Monster Prom, that's me. So if you want to date monsters, I got you.
If only you'd been around during my first wedding, man. God, you could have saved me so much.
But today, I have a pleasure that I never thought as a wee lad that I would ever have, to sit up here with two legends of the industry. I am blown away. We have Jason Hayes and Bill Roper. I can't stress to you how impressed I am to even be up here. So I wrote down questions because I knew I would forget. That's where I'm at mentally. So I figured we should just start before we get the inside scoop.
I got chills, Jesse.
That was
fantastic.
good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. How did you both get started at Blizzard? What brought you to the company? What was your first role? How did you get going there?
Okay, so they had a little convention called the Computer Game Developers Conference. Before there was GDC, if anyone knows the game industry, GDC is a famous thing. There was CGDC, and I went there on the recommendation of a friend of mine, and I walked around the convention, didn't know anyone, and I had a CD Walkman with music burned to CD, and I walked up to random people, and I said, "Hi, my name is Jason Hayes. Would you be willing to listen to music of mine?" And people were nice enough to humor me, and I put the headphones on them, and I got some fast friends. I actually met Bill Brown. He was with, at the time, Activision. They were promoting Pitfall. He's a very talented composer. And he told me, he put on the headphones and said, "That's a lovely theme." I said, "Well, I didn't know who he was, but that's a high compliment from Bill." So I was like, that was really nice. So anyway, eventually I found my way to the job fair, and Blizzard was looking for a sound designer. And they told me that they were taking it down, and they really weren't looking for one anymore. And so, but I made a contact there and followed up later on. So eventually I got to meet Glenn Stafford, who's the OG of the OG, the first guy in sound at Blizzard, and he hired me as the second guy. So it was great.
Well,
I got started at a good friend from college, a guy named Stu Rose, who was an artist there, and he said, "Hey, we've got a couple, 3 projects going on." This is when they were still Silicon and Synapse and making the transition to then realizing nobody knew what that meant. And then they were like, "We got to be something else." And they were going to be Chaos Studios for a while, and they found somebody else's Chaos Studios, and they said, "How about, I don't know, Blizzard?" And so that's where that all came from. But he worked there, and he said, "Hey, we got a lot of stuff going on. We're looking for somebody to do some contract music for the PC version of Blackthorn," which was their like coolest guy with a gun side scroller game. I think was some dubious award that it won. And so I met Glenn and started doing music. This was back in those fun old days where everything was for MIDI cards. And I got to learn very quickly that you had to do a thing called locking down a MIDI channel, which I didn't know. I was telling Jason earlier, the first time I brought it, I was like, "Oh, great, I wrote all this stuff." And I brought it in and brought it to Glenn's office, and we loaded it up on his computer, and he played it, and it sounded horrible. It was like snare drums and, I don't know, car horns. I was like, "What is, I don't," and he's like, "Did you lock down the MIDI channel?" I don't know what that means, Glenn. So then we spent an hour fixing it, and then it was like, "Oh, hey, that sounds pretty good. Oh, thanks, great." And during that time, they also were getting ready to show Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans for the first time at Summer CES. So back when we didn't have our own games conventions, and we had to go show video games at the Consumer Electronics Show. And they had a 10x10 booth, and they were going to be showing this cool video of what this new game they were coming out, first one they're publishing under their own label. And they needed voiceover for this big intro sequence they were going to be showing. And if you've ever go back, or if you played it, the original Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans intro, where it comes through the trees and comes up to the the castle gates. They had that was the beginning, and Glenn brought it out, and we're sitting in his office, which was literally a closet, and about this close, like I am, Jason, and he's showing it to me, and he's like, yeah, so here's what we're going to talk about these orcs and they're fighting humans. Is there a script? No. Okay. So I just grabbed pen and paper and started writing stuff down, and then it was in the age of chaos, 2 factions battled for dominance. And then it was just from there. And then after that stuff got done, I begged and pleaded my way in. I wrote a letter to Alan Adham, who was the president at the time, Mike Morheim, who was VP, and I said, I love doing this as a contractor. I'd love to have a full-time job. I'll do anything you want. Alan, I know you just bought a new car. I'll wash your car every week. Mike, I know you love magic. I'll give you my rock hydra. I'll work, and whatever it was, like whatever you guys want me to do. Like this old enough long ago, like run on your BBS board, any of that stuff. And they hired me, and then the first thing they asked was, so you can write. You wrote that intro thing. I said, yeah. They said, well, really, all we know is there's orcs and humans, and the bad guy's name is Blackhand. So my first real-time job was to write all the initial lore for the series, which then other people came in and did way better, way cooler, amazing stuff with. But it was fun to be there when we were planting the seed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, crazy.
I would love to get into a little more detail with all of that. So, Bill, going back to what you were talking about, you wore many hats at Blizzard. Producer, voice actor, writer, VP. How did a variety of roles like that affect the way you approached game dev or game production in general?
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard very much, the OG Blizzard stuff, right? It was a meritocracy. We just were like, we need people to do stuff, and you wore hats and you did it. And if you did well at it, you got to do more of it, and they give you responsibilities to do more of it. And if you sucked, they were like, all right, no harm, no foul. You shouldn't do that again. And usually you were like, yeah, you're right. I should never do that again. And I had plenty of those too. But I think the thing that is so good about that, and what I like about indies, and what I think we've lost a lot in AAA development, is that you gain an appreciation and a broad base of knowledge, right? As you mentioned, I got to work with design, with audio, voiceover, production, managing third-party stuff. I was the head of third-party development, which basically meant I got to hang out with the Blizzard North guys a lot. And so we just moved people around. But then when you went through, what it gave you was this amazing kind of lexicon, right, that you could go back to. So when we were talking with other people, I am by no means an engineer, but I speak just enough engineering because of the time I've spent with them to, be able to do that. And I think from a higher level, what that at least gave me was I got a pretty good nose to do sniff tests. So if I was talking with somebody going, oh, we can't do that because of this, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. I feel like you should be able to do that. Or alternately, which is far more useful, we can totally do that. And you're like, nope, you can't. Nope. But it's all towards figuring out how you can then accomplish the thing you want to accomplish. So I just that breadth of knowledge, I think, has served me really well over the last 100 years.
Jason, you have a big role in the world of Warcraft. And one of the parts of that game that I think everyone loves unconditionally, which is the music. And true. It's true. How did you approach creating what is essentially the musical identity of that game?
Well, I started out really insecure about it because I worked on a lot of cinematics at Blizzard, a lot of these cutscenes, this beautiful animation for their games. So I'd done that quite a bit for Diablo 2, and I'd done it for other things, the company. And then when World of Warcraft came along, I was really insecure because I'm thinking how am I going to do music for this gigantic game? And people are going to want to throw their speakers out the window. Because I'd heard an example of music that was done by a terrific composer. I'm not going to say who it is. I'm not going to say what it's for. But it was this lovely music that this person had done, and it was very ornamented and flourishing and very elaborate, beautiful music. But I remember thinking distinctly that, wow, I mean, you're not going to be able to listen to that for very long at all. And after maybe 3 times hearing it, you're going to just hate it, even though it was wonderful music. And so I made a mental note to myself and said, well, I can't do that because, it's got to be something where you can, hopefully it blends in and it feels like the way you wouldn't want to not have the lighting effects or the fog effects. You want it to be something that is just this inseparable part of the experience, make you feel something, not just be texture, because texture isn't very moody, but the goal was to try to write music that would be evocative of emotion, but also not ram you over the head, except for certain key moments where, there are certain parts in the game where you can afford to have a statement because you know what's going on and people are safe and no one's going to attack you. Like, for example, entering Stormwind in World of Warcraft is like that. Okay, some WoW players. Okay, yeah. So we went to Stormwind, you know exactly what people are doing, what they're looking at, and that really cool, that row of heroes, those statues, and people are safe. And at that moment, you can say something. And you don't want to say it every time. If you were to walk in and walk out and walk in again, we had the clever idea to make a cooldown, say you can't ever hear that again for 30 minutes, so you can't game the system too badly. But yes, that was the initial experience.
Awesome. Yeah, a follow-up on that. What is it like having to walk that line of potentially repetitive music? Like if you're in a zone or whatever and you're hearing the same song over and over and over, if you're standing there for hours, like how do you walk that line with like, it's an earworm, not something you're going to hate?
Yeah, so, stylistically what I did was I wrote several themes that were basically representative of different aspects that I thought were important for Warcraft. And so I had this kind of high adventure theme, and I had this kind of like all the different emotions you can imagine. I did like maybe 5 or 6 pieces of music that were written specifically for those emotions, but the plan wasn't even to use it at all in the game. The idea was say, okay, here this little suite of music, and now this will be my springboard of inspiration. So if I want to basically write something that could go in here, I could make a little reference to a theme or a gesture. And so I did that. I wrote music calling upon those themes and kind of borrowing from them in a way that wouldn't ever play verbatim those pieces, but it would hint at them. And so then if we ever had a moment where we could do an advertisement of some kind, I could put that theme on that trailer advertisement.
So it's more, would you say it's more like an ambient, like I don't want to say noise, but it's like it exists and it's there, but it's not something intrusive on what you're doing. It doesn't, constantly bombard you. It just makes the experience like elevated to that next level.
There are moments that definitely are more ambient, but I was really careful not to devolve into just a texture. And, we have those moments where we could say, okay, we're going to play a theme because you're walking in this area for the first time. Call that the signpost music. You walk in and it would kind of let you know, oh, you entered this area. But there are other times where it's really more ambient for sure. And you just got to pick your times. And,
Gotcha.
But yeah, I did not want it to be just texture, because you would never get tired of it, but it wouldn't move you emotionally in any way. So.
Right. I did have a question for Bill, but before we started today, I learned a fact that has blown my mind, and I think it needs to be shared.
Scoop.
It is, in fact, a
Here
scoop.
comes the scoop.
So, I have several StarCraft questions for you, but while we were talking, you informed me originally that StarCraft is going to be what exactly?
A Star Wars RTS. And we were working with Lucas Games on it and had several meetings and had even started visually building some stuff. And going along swimmingly in contract negotiations. Everything seemed like, oh, this is amazing. We're going to make a Star Wars game. Oh, this is going to be incredible. And then a little game called Yoda's Desktop Adventures came out.
Big fans.
Which we were then told apparently caused George Lucas to say, I don't know what the fuck is going on in the licensing department, but you need to stop everything right now so we can reevaluate. So, so then we basically were like at the phone call, like, oh, look, love you guys, love the Warcraft stuff. We officially can't talk Star Wars games right now. And we were like, okay. And then it was like, but the whole science fiction thing is really cool. Maybe we should just make our own. And then we just made our own IP, which probably was the best thing for the company. And hopefully fans too. But yeah, but that was originally going to be Star Wars. Yeah, we had a lot of interesting conversations back in the day. We talked with Danzig at one point about doing a game with him based off of some like comic book stuff he was doing. So I swear to God, I was in a meeting with Danzig, and I'm like, he's so like badass and tiny. Like, man, pretty sure I just met Wolverine for reals. I mean, yeah, but we had crazy conversations because that was just the time, right? People would say like, "Hey, we played your thing. I thought it was really cool. And we thought maybe there could be a cool match." And we would do the same thing. We're like, "Whose stuff do we like? I wonder if they might want to do video game together." But yeah, then we said like, let's go make our own thing. And then we very quickly made the mistake of saying, "Well, let's try to do it fast." And so we built it off the War II engine. So I know those images are out there in the world, but if you ever go and see those like basically Warcraft in space images, yeah, we came back from E3, and that was the comment that everybody on the floor made. We were like, we have to make something completely different, which threw another couple years onto the project probably, but obviously well worth it.
You mentioned sitting in a closet, or I guess standing in a closet, doing a narration for Warcraft. And eventually, somehow, that leads to you being one of my favorite characters of all time in Starcraft, Phoenix, who is exactly wonderful. And I'm so curious, can I assume you have no formal acting training?
No, I never went to school, never took no lessons. But spent a lot of years on the stage. I started the same year I started working at. I was a commercial music major. I was a vocal major in college. So used to being on microphones and performing and talking with audiences and all that fun stuff that comes along with that. And the same year I started at Blizzard, I also started a band with my college roommate to do the Southern California Renaissance Fair, which is still going. 31 years later, that band is still active, and has done some crazy stuff we never thought would happen. But so I had all that training, and when you're doing music, especially in vocal and songs, you're always trying to capture the persona of like what are the lyrics trying to bring across. So there's some element of that. But I'd always wanted to do voice acting, and I always been really into it. Because it was a meritocracy, and the first thing I got to do was all the Warcraft voices, which was 2 in the first game. I had the foot in the door, so I was always like, oh, I got to do a voice. I got to have some voices. And had the amazing opportunity to do Phoenix, which for me, being a longtime theater and film fan as well, I was immediately like, what StarCraft needs is Falstaff, and that was my mental place to put Phoenix from an acting standpoint.
It's fascinating because even to this day, when other actors have done Phoenix, everyone says the same thing, that it's missing the same quality as the original voice. And it's fascinating to me that the way you approach it is probably why that is the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, every role, right, every actor brings something different to that role, that interpretation. We, I think, had a great opportunity in those days to try a lot of stuff and make a lot of mistakes, right? Now it's tough. You're bringing in like incredibly talented voice actors. You're paying your union fees. You're like, I've got this person for 4 hours. You hope to God they, whatever it is. This is back where like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. Hey, that came across really well. I think we were at times helped by not knowing what we didn't know. But yeah, for me, it was something that, one of the things about Warcraft is when you look at it, it's this epic tale of battles between these two forces, right? One of the things we try to do from a lore standpoint is there isn't the good guys and the bad guys, right? When I was originally writing all the orc stuff, it was like they are noble in their own way, right? They're just not mindless monstrosities that the Alliance fights. Like, the Horde has driving factors and things that are important about them. And in the Warcraft series, we always baked a lot of humor in. That was kind of the way it went. Even when we came up with the whole concept of pistol lines, right? Which is, again, just like Glenn and I in a room. And I said, I notice a lot of times when you're playing and you click because you're waiting for a unit to build. What if we acknowledge that past the fourth wall? And it's like, what? Stop poking me! Like, they just get furious, right? And we're like, that's great. And we put it in and had Bob Fitch, one of the engineers, help us do that. And then we just put it out in the build and didn't tell anybody. And then they're playing it internally, and it was like, Sammy gets up from his desk and he goes over to Ron and looks at him. And then they get up and they go over to, and then they go to Alan's office. And then it was like, that was virality, by the way, back in the day. And then Alan comes out, he's like, okay, who put this thing in the game? And we're like, we did. He's like, that's great, do more of that. Okay, cool. Same thing on Starcraft with Phoenix, right? It was like, we're going to try some stuff. And the way I viewed it is that I didn't, for as much like pathos as there can be in that character, right? A lot of Starcraft is very heavy in the storyline, right? There's a lot of tragedy. It's an amazing story that Chris put together. But I wanted there to be a character that had those moments of a lighter feel, right? And that's one thing I always loved about Falstaff and Shakespeare is that it's like, here's this kind of tragic figure, really, but he's so blustery. Like when he's got a problem, he's going to blow through it in that way. And I was like, that feels like someone who's also very, in a lot of ways, especially where we were in the project at that point, antithetical to the Templar. Right, who are all very serious and very, it's like, oh, come on, where's the guy who's just like, let's grab a bunch of like space pints and then go out and do some stuff. But it is fitting with that, like then the writing for him was so great too, which makes it all that much easier as an actor. When you've got a great script to go from, that's great. And, that was to me the project where Metzen really exploded too, as a writer. And it was so easy to work off that stuff.
So during the late 90s, early 2000s, games as a form of entertainment and media constantly changes and grows. But during that late 90s, early 2000s period, it really seemed like things were changing in ways that never had before. There was, more and more online stuff. We saw Battle.net, and we started to get into WoW. And I'm really curious how you saw that as being a part of that time period, the two of you, and watching everything change and grow. And certainly it has since, but during that moment, I think it was really formative, not just for devs at the time or producers or, composers, whoever, but also for all of us who were playing the games. And I'm really curious what that was like for you in that time period.
Yeah, it was really cool because, we got to work on stuff in a whole variety of ways. So, I wasn't just doing music, I was doing sound design, directing voice actors, doing voices in the game. So it's like getting to wear all those different hats was a special time for sure. Over time, it became less like that, and it became more like, there were different projects going on, and I was answering to a lot of producers and things just to keep the communication flow going. But it didn't feel like you get a cool idea, you just do it. Nothing happened as quickly anymore. Mm-hmm. And I do miss that time for that reason. But it's great to be able to just kind of, it's very much fueled by passion. I had a very weird moment because I was on a panel like years later on when we were shipping StarCraft 2 and the those games, Legacy of the Void. And so, this is like part of the StarCraft 2 series, if you're not familiar with StarCraft. And so we're basically talking about the thing, and we were answering questions afterwards. And I was up there with all the sound designers and stuff, and we're talking about the audio for Starcraft, and someone had raised their hand for a question, and they said, okay, your sound and music and everything in the original Starcraft was just so wonderful, and it just had so much personality. And Starcraft 2, those games, it feels like it's professionally done, but it just doesn't have the same kind of special sauce or something. And it just doesn't feel as, iconic. What's the reason for it, for that, being different? And it was a very weird question because, like, we're talking about, like, StarCraft 2, and the whole panel just turned to look at me and said, well, Jason, you're the only one here at the time, so maybe you could explain. So I had to try to explain the fact that we didn't know what we were doing, and we were winging it. And, there was a lot of passion and a lot of excitement about doing things when you don't know what you're doing. And maybe, later on it became more like, okay, let's take what works about this and let's make it sound cooler. But you didn't have the crazy kind of accidents that happened in the first game.
Yeah, I think that's so true, right? We weren't sitting around running analytics numbers, looking through one-way glass to see what eye tracking was, and people were paying attention to the right part of the screen. We were making games that we wanted to play, candidly. That was it. That was the first motivating factor. Like, would we want to play this? Okay, well, that's probably the right thing, because we felt we were representative of the people already playing. We were all gamers. We all played. This was back in, like, we'd go work our ridiculous, stupid hours, and we'd hang out in the common area and play Magic. Right? We did it. We always hung out together. We did games. We did everything together. The Neo Geo tournaments that went on were insane, and it was this very unique time in that the industry wasn't, maybe from a business side, mature enough for those people to come in and then start dictating how we had to approach making stuff, right? No one was like, it needs to be this many products in this many months at this ROI. Like, none of that existed. It was basically like, hey, we should go make a cool thing. Wow, that did really well. Well, let's make another cool thing. Okay, well, what is that? And we literally, after the first Warcraft came out, a group of us all got together, like, what do we want to do next? And it was like, well, I don't know, maybe not another Warcraft thing. What if we did Warcraft? What if we did Warcraft, but it was like modern era? And there was a whole conversation for maybe about half an hour. And so it's like, imagine the opening cinematic. It's dragons flying through, right? And then, like, the portal opens, and here comes an F-16, and it's a battle. Like, and, like, so he's pitching that, right? Hardcore. And we listened to it. I think it was Alan was like, that sounds like shit. And we were all, yeah, that didn't feel very Warcraft, right? But we kind of still wanted to do more Warcraft, right? And so that led us to, well, what didn't we do in the first game, right? But it wasn't because anyone did data analysis or we had market feedback. Just like, the game's really, really bound. Like, what if we did, like, land, sea, and air? That would be cool. Yeah, we'd have flying units. We'd have units, like, on the ocean. That's going to be some cool stuff we could do. And it was always driven by that. What did we think was going to be fun for people to play? It was the same thing when we started then doing a lot of, and I think the thing that can get overlooked in that era was not only were we doing, like, game design stuff that was pretty revolutionary, we were then, based on what we wanted to achieve in the game, building technology that was revolutionary, right? Like, BattleNet is crazy that it even exists. Because at the time, A, no one was doing that, and B, the companies that were trying to do it were all charging for it. And we said, how cool would it be if I went to play a game and I wanted to play it against somebody else, and I just clicked a button, and then I could play with other people? That was the brief. There you go. Go make that happen. And it was like, the closest it can be to, like, click a button. Like, make it that simple. As close as that simple as we can do it. And we started talking about it, and everybody said, you guys are idiots. You're crazy. You could build a whole company off of that, charging people. I go, but if we do that, then people will want to buy the game. And that's what we want people to do, is play the game. We never were looking at it as, like, we could build a platform that would allow us to distribute games online for, like, what if people could just play Diablo with anybody else in the world? How fucking cool is that? And so those were the decisions that drove the process. And then because no one was doing that, we had to find weird ways to make it happen. And so one of the inside scoops, another inside scoop, is so when we came up with BattleNet and it started to become really popular, we would get asked a lot in interviews by other companies like, oh my God. But this is always how they would say it. BattleNet, like its services, this many people like that must have been like incredibly expensive to develop and to maintain. And we would just, my answer always in the family go, I was nodding my head because I wasn't going to tell them it was one guy who wrote it and we ran BattleNet off of a Pentium under his fucking desk. Because if you want to think it cost us tens of millions of dollars to make that and run it, that means you're not going to go try to figure it out. And we get to keep doing that and being the company that did that. But yeah, like Mike O'Brien wrote that whole thing basically, and it ran on a computer or two computers when they started to get real big under his desk for a long time, you know. And it was just, that was the crazy stuff we did. We're like, yes, let's make that happen. So
there's a reason why basically when they had an article in PC Gamer called Game Gods, Mike O'Brien
Mike was one of those guys. Yeah, I mean,
I got to ask him, Mike, what's it feel like to be a game god? He goes, pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, that was the big thing, right? And to Jason's point, like, you know, nobody was telling us we couldn't do this stuff. You know, both from a corporate standpoint, they were just like, just please make us money, because every 2 years we're getting bought by somebody else anyway, and then we had to keep reproving ourselves, which was a whole different thing. But nobody was out there coming in and saying like, what you're attempting to do is flying in the face of data analytics. Like, you can't do this, right? It's like, I don't know, we've done a bunch of other stuff and everybody liked that stuff. We're going to do the next thing. You know, even with Diablo, people were like, oh my God, RPGs are dead. You can't, how can you do this? It's going to be terrible. Nobody plays this, you know? And originally, which is pretty broadly known now, originally that game was going to be turn-based, much like XCOM. It's going to be claymation, was the original art style for Diablo. And then I was producing on that. I was the liaison down in Irvine, and the guys at Blizzard North 6 were building it. And we showed it to the whole studio at one point, pretty early on. And we're watching it, and there's the phone booth that comes up and doing the moves, like just like XCOM, right? The whole thing comes up, move over there. And Alan said, is there a reason this isn't real time? And I haven't really talked about it that way, you know. And he said, how many people here think this should be real time, right? And everybody except one person raised their hand in the studio, and it was Bob Fitch. And then he's like, Bob, why don't you think it should be real time? He's like, I don't know how I would control like 6 heroes in real time like that. And I was like, oh no, it's not. It's a single hero. He's like, oh yeah, real time. So we got on the phone and called Brevik, and we're like, so we think it should be real time. And Dave, who is used to running that studio very tight, you know, and everything was like, oh God, Bill, we gotta make it real time. Now we're gonna do that. It's gonna be terrible. It's gonna cost so much money. It's gonna take so long. And then he went and coded it in like a day and a half. And then Matt Ullman, who's their music and audio guy, put together this sound effect for the skeletons falling, which was him basically taking pencils on his desk and just going. And that was the skeleton bones, right? Puts it in, and Dave said the first time he took the fighter and hit a skeleton in real time, and it collapsed. He's like, that was it. Like the chills, the light bulbs went on, right? But like nobody's telling us don't do that. We're just like, oh, that feels really cool. Okay, change the entire game to be that now.
Is that why during that time when Diablo first came out, I vividly remember that all of the like PC gaming articles and things like that, the art for it seemed claymation looking. Is that why?
It might have been. I mean, we were also doing this like 2.5D thing, right? Which is like 3D models, but it's a 2D plane.
Sure.
Right? And so I think that was kind of part of the particular style and the angle that we got on it. And just the texturing, things could look a little lumpy, I think.
Yeah, I remember like they would have, like a Diablo-esque character, and it just was like, oh, it looks like a claymation thing.
Yeah, the Butcher was super claymation.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really funny. So I did the voice for that, and it's just like, here's like, I kind of want that guy to be like, where you going, pal? I want to give you a big hug, But they're like, no, he's terrifying. He's going to be like, okay, we won't do that then.
So you both were talking about taking chances and doing things during that time period. I would love to know any thoughts or any insights you have about the games that didn't make it. So obviously there are things like at some point you said, let's make a Warcraft point and click. And then like, let's make a Starcraft shooting game. And they never saw the light of day. So what was that? I imagine it's heartbreaking when they don't come to fruition. But during the process of doing all of that, what's that like to have this idea, put in the time and the energy, and then be like, well, it's just not working?
I'll jump on the start with, since I got to kill projects. Yeah, so there was, it was interesting. Sometimes it was just, I'll point out 3 real quick. So one, there was a game called Shattered Nations, which didn't get a ton of press. It was actually on a preview CD, so there was a little cinematic we did for it. That was going to be our Civ killer. That was like the way we talked about it internally. I led design on that project. We had a full working weather system. Like we had all this really cool stuff, and it was very much in the vein of Civ, so turn-based. And we actually had this idea of, and it was Stu Rose, artist, and I, at a coffee shop until 2 a.m, fueled by way too much caffeine. And the original design was done on butcher block paper that was on the table. Us just like writing out, and it was going to be a 3-game series. And the first one was Shattered Nations, where you started from post-apocalyptic to building up to having a nation. And the next one was going to be then trying to take your nation and gaining world dominance. And then the third one was space exploration based off. And each one, you would take your save file, and that started your next game.
Oh, wow.
That was the thing. So if you finish Shattered Nations, you could start the second game with your nation, right? We're building it. It's going great. We have a team on it, kind of a small team. And then around the time when we were making the switch to going real time with Diablo, as a company, we decided we're not going to do turn-based games. One of the things that's going to help Blizzard stand out is everything we do is real time. And we're like, that does not work for a Civ game, at least what we're building. So we just canceled it, and it just got canned, and it just disappeared, right? So it was gone. But that was us saying, like, we're not going to do this kind of game anymore. Warcraft Adventures, which you mentioned. Again, we loved adventure games. We were like, we think that there's like such good stories in the Warcraft universe, such amazing characters. We want to do a game that is a storytelling game. That point in time, point-and-click adventures were the way you'd want to do that. We grew up loving all the Lucas stuff, and Tim's work there. And so we started building that. It was a little difficult from the fact that by that point, our corporate overlords were like, you should have some synergies with other studios that are within the entire scope of stuff. So here's this other company that we also own at a corporate level that you should work with it as point-and-click adventures. And so we started working with them, and it was like, oh, you guys have only done like kids stuff. Okay, so we got to have a tone and art style and work through all that. And it just wasn't coming together. We actually brought Steve Maretsky in, if you know Steve Maretsky's work on like Superhero League of Hoboken and like just amazing adventure game designer. And so I brought Steve in for like, I think a month to go through and revamp everything, right? We went through, rewrote everything, got it all lined up to do. We had freaking Optimus Prime, Peter Welker as a voiceover on it, one of the actors. And we got to the point where we were like, okay, this is how much more time we have to do. This is what we have left to do on it. And then 2 things happened simultaneously. One, I went to the development team that was working on it, and I said, so here's what we need to do, and it requires this kind of like big systemic change. And a lot of it was the way the user interface worked. We're like, how long is it going to take? And they were like, oh, that's going to take us like 4 months. I was like, yeah, why should it take you 4 months? That's changing like a database, and like, that should take you guys maybe a week. Oh, yeah, we don't use a centralized database in our engine, so we have to change it in every single room and then track what goes in and doesn't. And I was like, what? Right, like fundamental structural flaw in the way they've done the game. Like, okay, that's bad. Okay, maybe we can work around that. And then Grim Fandango got announced, and we were like, oh my God, it's 3D and that looks so cool. We're making like color forms, 2D, like the way we felt about it. We're just like, we can't do this. Like, to retool it and revamp it and everything else, like, we should take all those stories, all this character work and Thrall and all this other stuff we've done and use it somewhere else, which we did. Huge in, Warcraft. And I remember that was right before an E3. We'd done cover stories, big announcements. And I remember going and saying, so we need to cancel Warcraft Adventures. It was not popular in the company or out for that time. And I said, yeah, so, and then we called our vendor. We're like, so all those Warcraft Adventure booths, can you just make those all Starcraft booths? So that was we had a massive presence that year. The last one, Starcraft Ghost, that was us candidly going like, wouldn't it be cool to make this kind of game and tell the story of a ghost, because that'd be really great. And it was just problem after problem after problem. I'm going to say a lot of it was within Blizzard trying to direct a game through multiple third-party developers while never having a clear idea of the game themselves. A lot of people got put on that as their first leadership project initially, which is also a big challenge. And then we always used to talk about at Blizzard the Eye of Sauron. So you could be working on something, and then eventually the Eye of Sauron would look upon your project, and you're like, "Oh shit!" Oh, it's like the lights come on, and all the cockroaches are like. So eventually, like the Eye of Sauron came onto Starcraft Ghost, and they had been like doing all their own story stuff. Everything was there, and I totally get it. But at the same time, Metzim was like, "This story sucks. We got to start over." And they'd already done all these cinematics and everything, and it seems like people like quit that studio. They were like, we can't do this again. I can't go build a whole nother Starcraft Ghost, right? And it got to the point where they changed it, and the kind of game it was changed, and it, went from a big battlefield thing. We had a whole demo where you were the ghost on a battlefield, and Terrans were defending against a Zerg onslaught, and you had to go to like different points and snipe, and eventually call down. You were using all of the ghost's abilities, right, from the game, but in this like third-person thing. Till it eventually became like a Metal Gear Solid thing, and like on and on. And that one just like, I don't know, it was like the slow, long death, right? Where just they never found the right footing to do that. So it was always a different reason. But I will say the thing that was good about that is that meant for a lot of years, when a game came out, it was good.
Right.
We didn't release the stinker because we were like, well, I don't know, we're already $5 million in. I guess we got to release it. Well, maybe we'll shovel it out. Hopefully no one will notice. Because that was always Alan's big thing. And I'll stop this segment with that. Is I remember when I started there, Alan said, my goal for this company is that even if you've never heard of the game and you don't know what it is, if you go to the store and you see it says Blizzard on the box, you will buy it because you know it's a good game. And so that commitment to quality was always forefront.
Was there anything, Jason, when you were creating music that you said, this rocks, this is amazing, I love this, and someone was like, we have no use for that, we don't know what to do with that, and you were like, oh, all right. Like, was there ever a moment, or was it you knew what you were going into every single time and you were like, this is my task, I must achieve X?
It's always a little bit of guesswork. I mean, there was a point where someone asked me to write something, kind of scary, kind of creepy, I'm like, oh, yeah, let's do this. And so I ended up writing what was essentially almost like a horrific cue. It was the scariest music. And the reaction came back and said, what the heck, man? I mean, I'm petrified. It's freaking me out. Well, this is not what I want. I said, did you want scary? No. It's like a Sleepy Hollow kind of vibe. Oh, you want like a whimsical kind of dark, but so that's what became Duskwood. And wow, I ended up writing more of a Sleepy Hollow kind of a. So the cool thing with World of Warcraft is like everything can get used. There's going to be some place that having a horrific moment can happen. So it's not wasted. It just may be used somewhere different. But yeah, so. That's an example of when I'd written something that wasn't exactly. The other time when I'd written something where it didn't quite hit the mark was I mentioned before about Stormwind. It's like I wrote a theme for Stormwind, and I had this really idea that this would be really neat. That's just the idea of like, it's the highest aspirations that this alliance wants to have to be a noble, people, and I put my heart and soul. I was so excited, and I played it for some guys, and they said, "Yeah, it's kind of it's pretty cool, but we were thinking maybe more like this is Warcraft, it's like fighting, it's intense, I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me ask you, can you just sit on it for a little while? I'm willing to go back to the drawing board, but just like live with it for a while and stuff, and see what you think. But we'll talk about it next week. And I was, so I'll think about some other ideas. Well, about a week passed, and they came back to me and they said, actually, we actually really like it. It really is like we had a different idea of what we were thinking it would be, but it's actually what you did. It works really well. So that ended up being, I didn't have to go back but you have to be willing to change it, because at the end of the day, even if you're a creative person and you have this idea to want to like pursue this passion you have, it's like at the end of the day you have a lot of people you're answering to, and so it would have to be something that works well for the team that I'm doing it for. And but luckily they came around to on that one. So, yeah.
Do you have a personal favorite piece that you've written? You're like, that's the one. It's the one I think about all the time. I love that came out of my head.
Oh, that's so funny. I mean, I don't really think in those terms, although there have been times where something has taken on a life of its own that I never planned for at all. Like, I wrote this one trailer for, gosh, it was back in 2001 for Warcraft. It was a piece called A Call to Arms, and I wrote it for a trailer. And it ended up working well for the trailer, and people liked it. But what ended up happening is it ended up being used all over the place. Like, Neil, the head of marketing, started using that theme to represent, Warcraft and all kinds of press things. And it became like a point where it became a joke. He came up to me and said, "Man, Jason, you got to write me some new music. I'm just sick of using the same thing." Of course, he's being tongue-in-cheek. He was just using it over and over again because he used it to brand Warcraft. And so it was really cool to have this thing used in a way I would have never expected. Like years after I wrote it, all of a sudden we have Mr. T talk about the Night of War, and
Yep.
with my theme, I was like, oh, it's really cool. So yeah, that was really nice. So I get very, very passionate and interested in anything I'm writing, but it was cool to see that kind of take on a life of its own.
I wrote this down because I want to be very specific with this question as we get into this. In 2026, looking back at the last 20 plus years of your work and everything you've done, what is one thing that you did at the time that you're surprised still resonates with people today? That just caught you off guard and you're like, I can't believe that they picked up on it. They love that? Wow.
Yeah, gosh, I feel really lucky because there's a couple, three that come to mind. In no particular order, really fast. The first three that popped into my head: one, the pissed sounds, like just that people found it as delightful and playful to find this little audio Easter egg because it just was so spur of the moment, and that people still talk about that. And how much fun that became in the real world to play with. I used to go to LAN tournaments way back in the day and walk behind people. Your town is under attack, and want people just like freak out. They're like, oh, they're like scrolling around, like which town? Like, so getting to that was, but just people clicking through and then seeing how that, like, not only permeated through the games, right? Like became kind of like a hallmark inside of Blizzard stuff, but then outside of that, people really remember those. I think a thing that was a weird solution to a hard problem that people still talk about was Uber Diablo and the Stone of Jordan, which was, for those people who know, we had a dupe bug that was around for a while. People duped this item called the Stone of Jordan, which they got multiple ones of, and it became the de facto economy of Diablo 2. And the thing that was interesting is we came with we had a big brainstorm at Blizzard North, like, how are we going to get rid of this? What are we going to do? How's this not going to destroy the rest of the economy? And there was a lot of sticks that got introduced. Like, we'll have a rust storm. It'll destroy all of them. Or we'll roll back the servers. But it always came down to, but what if somebody in good faith traded for that? Or it was an actual drop they got, and we accidentally did that, right? So I pitched the other direction, which was like, oh, what if we had an event that got triggered by selling Stones of Jordan to vendors, so this goes back to the game and out of the economy, and then it spawns something, and it's the only way to get it, and it gives you like a cooler item. But we fixed all the bugs, so we know it's a single one. And people still talk to me today about like, oh my god, like the whole Uber Diablo thing was so cool, right? And it was to fix a problem. You know, and I think the third one, I mean, just candidly, is seeing how much, from a higher level, how much impact the games have had on people, right? I'm sorry, he just stepped out. I joked earlier, Jason, I did the autograph session. I was so honored to sit at Jason's table because everybody came up to me going, oh man, the music, when I step into Azeroth, like sometimes I'll just start the starter zone just to listen to the music, you know, like it's incredible like how that touches people and those games and the fact that, you know, I officiated at a wedding for two friends that met by being in a WoW guild, you know, and I ended up officiating their wedding, and like, you know, by the power invested in me by the state of California and the Kingdom of Azeroth, I now pronounce you, you know, and I'm doing the Warcraft voice the whole time and all that kind of stuff. But just seeing those moments and how that touches people, right? And I had an amazing opportunity to go to South Korea a lot, especially back in the, you know, the Starcraft days and stuff, and going and talking to people, and it'll always stick with me. It's just like so humbling and gratifying. There was this woman that came up to me, and she was in a PC bong, a game room, and she said, I just, through an interpreter, was saying, I just want to let you know how meaningful this game has been, because it's allowed us to open 5 PC bongs. I employ 30 people.
Wow.
This whole thing, and it's just like we're just making a video game. We're just trying to make a thing that would be fun to do, and the unintended impact that has on people's lives is just like so meaningful. And it can be the tiniest thing you do that you think is just for fun, or you're trying to provide a way for people to connect with each other, you know, all around the world. So seeing that happen is just staggering, no matter how long ago it happened.
Yeah. Well, we are quickly, I'm about to say slowly running out of time, but quickly running out of time. So I would love if we could, despite the fact that I have many questions left, I'd love to see if anyone out there has any questions that you would like to ask. We can do 2 or 3. Yeah, of course. We have our lovely microphone assistant here who will help you out.
With like the best mustache, by the way.
Thank you. It's falling off.
Who has a question? Love to see some hands. Let's go with the power of the front row. 1 and then 2.
Thank you for this panel. You mentioned the really good environment in early Blizzard. I'm curious, if you were navigating the indie world today, what are green flags that you would look for?
Well, I am navigating the indie world. I have my own studio. There's after 3 years of looking, finally got enough money to put a vertical slice together, which is exciting. There's 13 of us like there now, most under contract. 3 of us co-founded. And like in terms of green flags, it's like, what is the experience, not only in terms of development, but just as like people, as much as you can find out of the founders, right? Like, who are they, the people who are starting the studio? Because they're the ones that then kind of set the tone for everything. What is it like when you're like interacting with other people in the studio? We're a remote studio, so we do everything. Discord is like our main way of people there. Like, we do a lot to make it set up where it's like, we're super transparent. Radical transparency is one of our pillars. We're like, we'll tell you, unless I am contractually limited from telling someone on the team something, I will just tell them, you know, because it's like, look, we brought you on because we admire what you do. Well, we think you'd be a great member of the team. You're a professional. I don't need to like fudge production schedules or keep things secret from you, because all that's going to do is make it harder later when that bites me in the ass, which it will, because it always does. So like, I look for candor and transparency and honesty and experience. I mean, you know, and it's tough because a lot of indie studios starting up don't have some of those components. Experience, hopefully, is the one they don't have. But, you know, you can also see that, you know, we talk about it a lot in games. I think it's overused, but passion is part of that too, right? Are the people that are there working on the project, do they want to be there doing it? And that doesn't mean they're putting in a bunch of free hours. It doesn't mean they're working on weekends. It means like when they're working, they're super engaged. They're like talking about it. They're bringing you really cool ideas. I think that was maybe a secret sauce at the original Blizzard, is that there was no bad idea. Everybody could bring an idea everywhere, open door policy for everything. In fact, in the original Diablo, if you hit the Z key, it would zoom in, right? That came from one of the sales guys. He said, hey, I played the latest build. We were in an all-company meeting. I played the latest build, Steve Hewitt. And he was like, I heard goes, first of all, I heard and this is genius too, I heard the sound of a ring dropping, right? Giving the ring that bling. Everybody's like, oh, that's a super valuable item. If you look around, it's like, I couldn't find it anywhere because of this, like the noise in the background. It's like, is there any way we could like zoom in to be able to see that? I mean, there was like, oh, yes, we could, right? Nobody was like, oh, shut up, sales guy. We're game developers. You don't know, right? So I think that's an important part, right? So is a studio open to that? Is like an indie team open to like, yeah, we want ideas from everybody?
Great question.
That's my green flag.
All right. Yes. Hit us with what you got.
You guys have probably been asked over and over, what's your number one piece of advice? I actually want to hear your absolute worst piece of advice you could give somebody that's trying to work in game dev or any of these design things.
You got one?
Well, the hardest learned lesson I had from a young time that I think I've finally been broken of it, but I would tell someone that they need to basically pursue like their creative impulse. Just don't listen to anyone else. Just follow your creative impulse, because it'll work out, because you need to convince everyone that what you think is like the way to go. Because that's what I dealt with when I first started. I mean, I'm a naturally energetic person, and so I become excited about an idea. I think, oh, this is going to be great musically. I'm so excited, and then I'd want to like convey the excitement I had for this idea. And I would just communicate very excitedly about it. But what's weird is that excitement can be mistaken for being kind of rigid. Maybe you're not so open to hearing other people's opinions. And so even though I always felt like I was open-minded, they just gotta see what I see, But I was a young, naive person trying to be creative. But really, learning the lesson of I need to make sure that I'm treating myself like I'm of service to these people. And hopefully at the end of the day, we get a result that they're excited about, because they need to be excited about it. Otherwise, I'm not going to stay on the project. And also I have to be excited about it too, because, they hired me for a reason. So I need to try to basically bring my best to it, but I have to make sure that they're along for the ride. Otherwise, I'm a lonely island if you don't have the support. So.
Mine is do whatever it takes, no matter how many hours you have to put in, and don't care if you get paid. That's bullshit. Total bullshit.
Good advice.
Do we have time for one more? One more question. Let's do this. That hand is raised so high in the back. Let's go.
Back row, let's do it.
Oh, okay. If you guys knew that Warcraft would be going 20 years later, or at least World of Warcraft, or the whole franchise in general, what would you have done differently had you known it would keep going and going?
Gotten royalties. I'm like,
Yeah.
we're like day players, right? Like everybody's like, oh, I swear to God, and I'm kidding. People be like, oh man, you must have just been living on that Warcraft money. I'm like, nope.